Hello and welcome at Devolutions presentation on federated identity management with the help of privileged access management. So I'm Maurice Cote. I'm the business architect at Devolutions for a while now. I'm the product owner of the PAM module, and I work with not only the analysts but also the PAM partners. We are partnering with the top leaders of the Gartner quadrant. So I have extensive experience in the PAM space. I also have been involved in SOC 2, ISO 27001, and GDPR programs at my organization. So that security landscape in the last years has changed drastically. Oftentimes, it's a bad guy inside the organization. There have been hacks, obviously, really in the recent weeks, but still a lot of concerns arise from privileged users and how they practice security as part of their day-to-day operations. You see there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is still one of the top used passwords in 2020. It's hard to imagine that we're still experiencing these types of concerns, but that's where we're at. What is PAM? So 10,000 feet view is privileged access management. So it's how we handle the sensitive operations, the sensitive endpoints, and let's say access to your backups, access to your encryption keys, access to your authentication certificates. So these are all really sensitive information that we need to control. Obviously, at the root of privileged access management are privileged accounts. So we see a variety here, domain admins, local admins, privileged users. We'll see later on that dual account privilege, where some of your users have 2 accounts for their day-to-day use. Applications account, so that's widely used for DevOps type of things, really. You have a script that starts a new virtual machine when your website is under a load. So it will create a new web server to handle the load, and that will be automated, and that will be using most likely an application account. System accounts, you have that on most of your servers, be it Windows or the Linux family. So these operate under really high privileges, and they are really privileged accounts. Domain service accounts is the same type of things. But what of privileged users? So in the past, a few years back, we thought of privileged users only as sysadmins. But nowadays, we realize that accounting, HR, and marketing with their social media account, they can deeply affect an organization if they behave badly or if they're not security conscious. We've seen phishing attacks, and the more scary spear phishing, where the phishing email is made for you specifically. They've studied your profiles, and they are attacking that person in that seat. So that's really scary. So these privileged users, they can adversely affect an organization if they are subject to an attack. And then on the right, you have these privileged IT users. We've been used to them for the longest time now, traditional IT, DevOps, CloudOps. So these have access to, again, your backups, your encryption keys, your private key for authentication, securing your network. So these are really users that you must monitor, and you must really make sure that their activity is appropriate. A big area of concern, obviously, if you have identity and access management system, you control a lot of federated systems. Where the PAM may be able to come in to play is managing these non-federated systems. So let's say you have network equipment, so switch, Wi-Fi hotspot, printers, specialized machines. Let's say you have machining specialized tools that do have remote access protocols. They can be really accessed using accounts, but most likely not using a federated system that is tied into your IAM. As on the right hand side now, we have for privileged IT, you have these legacy business applications. I still see customers that have XP and Internet Explorer because of those legacy applications, and they're most likely not tied into any IAM. So these have really accounts, and oftentimes they must be shared. So that's a huge concern. Social media accounts, oftentimes they do not have the capability of allowing a specific user to act in the name of the business. So they must have HR admin, or they must have an account that is shared across the team. So how do you control that aspect that is not managed by any IAM? And also task-oriented accounts. So this brings us back to DevOps, CloudOps. If it's not a human that is performing an operation, it will be really in reaction to an event. Again, describing that website, that web server that needs to be spun up in seconds. It will be done through the use of task-oriented accounts. So all of these accounts, be it for a user or for a system, can be handled by a PAM. If you look at the analysts, they describe PAM of having 6 to 8 major modules. But at the core of it, you have a good password vault. So the vault is your storage system for these accounts. They provide gated access, maybe using a synchronous approval by a person, or by providing, let's say, a validation that you have a ticket that allows you to access that sensitive servers. So that vault will implement all of these workflows. Oftentimes also it will perform account discovery. So look in your AD or IAM if an account appeared, and is it created maliciously, or has it been approved by an account provisioning workflow. So these are all features of a PAM. Also password rotation. So if you imagine shared accounts, you cannot allow the password to be learned. And if ever it is learned by the user, it must be rotated as soon as they are done using that password. So in most PAMs, they have a checkout, check-in workflow, and the check-in triggers a password rotation. So even if the user would have learned the password by some mechanism, it has become really out of date as soon as they perform the check-in. And also another advanced feature of a password vault is emergency or break the glass scenarios where you cannot get approval. It's late night, Saturday night. You need access to a password. So advanced password vaults would allow for that. So it can be a distributed key system. It can be a lot of mechanisms. But again, these are features of the password vault. The second module that we'll focus on is the privilege session management. PSM in short. And you have a wide array of choices there, but the most basic features are establishing that session. So if you want to connect to that switch, that network switch, or that printer that is not under your IAM system, you can connect using most likely RDP or SSH protocols to that remote endpoint. And the nice added value feature is to have that account brokering where the password is sent in your name without it being revealed. So we feel that that's a value added feature of a PAM. Obviously, there is auditing and monitoring. I kept that single sign-on here, but for you guys, for this audience that knows about identity and access management, that's federated identities, the way I mean it. But in the PAM space, people often say it's single sign-on because they log in to the vault and we take care of authenticating in their name for other systems. But since we're using shared accounts, it's not truly single sign-on, but that's what the industry uses, sadly. Advanced session management would be session shadowing. So you have a third party that can monitor in real time what's going on in that remote session and oftentimes interrupt it. There can be video recording, keystroke recording, logging of the windows or the programs that would be started within that session. So these are advanced features, but you can easily see that pairing the vault with the session establishment features of a PAM are really key in adding value to your IAM. Again, in your case, it may be just for shared accounts because your IAM may control 100% of unique accounts that are exposed by your identity provider, but still, real life makes it so that we do have shared accounts. I describe here a few well-known principles, the dual account principle. A lot of IT users, they have a least privilege account and a high privilege account, sometimes called a dash account because they use dash and min. But you can understand that they should never open an email, a PDF document or a Word document even with their high privileged account token live on that machine because there are attacks using what I've described earlier, these Acrobat documents, these Word documents, and their goals are mostly to grab your authentication token. So that's where they must balance their least privileged account for opening emails and for performing the mundane tasks, and then switch to their high privileged account for their sensitive operations. And in the PAM space, sometimes they view that as being a bad practice. But again, we're pragmatic. We see a ton of users that use that. So why not help them in doing that properly? I see a lot of customers that they do not even know their credentials for their high privilege account because they use that account brokering feature of grabbing their high privileged account, which is under a PAM vault, and use it, having is submitted for them automatically, and then even the password rotated when they're done. So that's a huge value added feature of a PAM. So storing their high privileged account in their vaults. You see they're passwordless. Some people say that going passwordless is the end of PAMs, but we see that in the PAMs that we have less passwords, but the ones that we have are really really sensitive. Again, going back to the keys to the kingdom, they can really wreak havoc on your network infrastructure or in accessing your backups. You know, we have, as part of our disaster recovery, we have backups offsite in another cloud provider, and that identity and access management system, that identity provider, is sometimes we do have to use shared accounts to push these backups and so on. So these accounts that are in our vaults are really sensitive. This is really a basic diagram of an IAM system. In the PAM, you see again that vaulting with workflows and account brokering and so on, and alerts and audits, with that session establishment for hardware, for apps using maybe shared accounts, maybe a user's privileged account, but ideally with an account that they're not aware of the passwords. So by pairing these two, so in the IAM, you have these users and all of the identity paired to a user, but most likely not all of your network equipment and all of those hard to reach devices that are not federated. So by pairing the two, you can gain visibility because the PAM does have audits and logs and syslog integrations, so you can have a full view of the activity in your infrastructure by pairing the two. So there is a live Q&A right after this talk. I'm most likely already there. So please join me for any questions and or comments. So thank you.